technically we are superior to Ethereum, to Solana, to Cardano, in my view, across a huge range of use cases.
Rob, it's been a rocky week this week, but we're still having fun with it. Welcome back.
Well, not rocky from my perspective. I've had, apart from getting my maths wrong on the on Shark Bites last week, I've had a great week. I mean, I've been back-to-back calls and project meetings and everything. So yeah, I've had a really good week. Thanks.
All right, sounds good. So we're going to jump right into the questions here. The first one comes from Lewis, who says, are C-suite decision makers in the DLT ecosystem listening to the likes of Michael Saylor less or more? Is the cult following that Bitcoin has hurting the legitimacy of this industry, as its main value is companies making money off the masses trading it? And he says, House of Cards. The first thing that I kind of want to bring up around this before you reply to it, Rob, is I do think Bitcoin has a tremendous amount of value. I do believe in alternative forms of currency. I think it keeps the governments in check in a lot of ways. Gold has served that purpose for a long time, and I think Bitcoin can do that as well. And I also think that if things went really bad in the fiat economy, it's good to have backups, right? And Bitcoin can serve that purpose. So it does have real utility that I think is important. And all the trading that happens and everything else around speculation, that's what attracts capital into the ecosystem in the first place. So that's important as well. And for those trades to go through in an efficient manner, you have to have those traders out there that provide liquidity. So those are all good things that are happening around the Bitcoin space. But I do actually think that HBAR has the ability to serve as that alternative currency as well, but it also has a completely different value proposition in that it's very useful in overhauling the financial system, which we talk about here week in and week out. So I do think that's important. I think HBAR could serve that role just as easily as Bitcoin could, with that extra kicker in the back that it has real utility. So I wouldn't say it's a complete house of cards, but I do understand what he's saying in that there is two parts of this DLT space. One is all the speculative and the crazy stuff that happens out there. And then it's the real stuff that's being built in transactional Internet of Things and everything else that we talk about here week in and week out. But Rob, what's your take on this question and him implying that Bitcoin kind of draws away from the value we see in the rest of the DLT space?
Yeah, well, I'm the last person really to ask about crypto economics, because I try and stick to my lane and keep to the technology and the utility perspective. But no one can deny that Bitcoin is the granddaddy of all crypto. It is a store of value. It's a new asset class that is recognized by governments and institutions around the world now, increasingly. So it can't be faded. Clearly, and as you say, it's quite different to Hedera, although HBAR is listed amongst all the crypto. The variety of different token types that all get mashed together kind of lose the differentiation unless you kind of take a second look. And as we know, most of the crypto community don't really look too deeply. They're just in it for the casino, which does draw these conclusions with houses of cards and and Ponzi's. But Bitcoin aside, it has to be there to actually break the mold, to provide, as you say, different ways of investing and storing one's value. It also serves the purpose of drawing that attention, drawing that value, drawing that liquidity from other more traditional asset classes into something which can then filter down into the rest of the ecosystem. So, I think Bitcoin is here to stay. It'll be with us for the foreseeable future. And so we have to work out how to work within that ecosystem. Now, unlike Hedera, most of those other cryptos are lookalikes. They're drawn from the same barrel, if you like, as the Bitcoin open source. And so you get diminishing returns, in the thousands and thousands of tokens. But Hedera is not like them. Hedera was built from first principles. It was designed by Lehman Baird with, from a different perspective. although the outcome was similar to blockchains, it's very different. And this is why Hedera does stand apart from all of the rest. And the utility of Hedera, like you say, is unparalleled. So unlike pretty much every other blockchain, which has its niche, it has its community, and that's what Web3 is about, Hedera has a broad base that can be applied across so many different use cases. And therefore, that differentiation is the thing which really does stand us apart from the rest. We, of course, need to exist within the wider Web3 community, which is why the bridges and the integrations are all really necessary and now coming on, in leaps and bounds, because it's similar liquidity that kind of flows around the Web3 space, the tooling, the developers. We're fighting for all of the same things, but once the dam breaks and Hedera is seen as being actually not just another crypto, but truly the next generation of the internet. That's how I see it. Then every developer, every investor, every user that wants to use it will gravitate, I believe, towards Hedera. But that doesn't mean Bitcoin will go away. Bitcoin will be there for the foreseeable future because it serves a very different purpose. Maybe we'll get more parity in terms of crypto pricing, but that's only one very kind of minor, well, not minor at the moment, but one metric. The utility of Hedera is paramount in my mind, and therefore that's what's going to drive everything else. As we over the next few years.
Well, I think that's very well covered. One of the things that I think is often talked about, and Ethereum tried to claim this one, but they talk about Bitcoin as digital gold. And certainly as far as above ground gold, there's a tremendous amount of value there. But as far as what's traded, if you compare that to the energy markets, the oil markets, and everything else, it's much smaller as far as what's traded from a day-to-day basis. And that's kind of what we look at. Ethereum has talked about being digital oil in the past to Bitcoin's digital gold. I think there's obviously going to be a fight there at the top for these layer ones that act as a utility. So I think Hedera might end up being that digital oil. Obviously, we don't want to get tied to the dirtiness of oil, but you know what I mean, that it has that utility.
And I think that's our target, right? We are not Bitcoin, but we are certainly, in my view, the best of the rest. So ensuring that the rest of the world recognizes that should be our target. And why not? We are superior to Ethereum, to Solana, to Cardano, in my view, across a huge range of use cases. And we're really just getting started, right? And the roadmap, if you look at the hash graph roadmap for Hyro and Hedera, which is now based on the Hyro open source, it's not stopping, right? It's if anything, it's accelerating. So I honestly think that within the foreseeable future, we will see Hedera competing up there as that silver to Bitcoin's gold, if you like.
There you go. All right. So well said again. The next thing we're going to touch on caused some heartburn this week. It was a controversial subject. Takame had a comment on a change that was made to the Hedera platform that wasn't announced, and it caused issues for all kinds of builders, platforms, and businesses out there that are building on Hedera. Do you have any thoughts on this incident and the rigor around making changes to the Hedera network?
Yeah, so this is a change. This is a breaking change, actually, that was made to the SDK. So this is nothing to do with the mainnet, nothing to do with the nodes. The core engineering team and Hedera and Hyro are so detailed around governance on. This is an SDK which builders and apps utilize in order to interact with the Hedera network. And I've spoken to Lehman and the Hashgraph team about this. There was a TechCom earlier that I raised it as a question, and it was a mistake. There was a method on the previous version of the SDK that needed to be changed. And even though the Hashgraph team believed that they'd, put close support in to key builders across the ecosystem, one-to-one support in some instances, provided education and announcements, clearly it wasn't sufficient because, as you say, there was pain within certain parts of the community, and in some parts of the community, a lot of pain, and I think that's kind of recognized. So it's probably best to direct the question to Richard Baer or someone on the Hashgraph team. But from my perspective, it's and I have projects that have been impacted by this. So kind of I've personally felt some of this pain as well, or some of my teams have. However, that said, it didn't affect the main network, and these are lessons that are being learned. I'm sure Hashgraph will ensure that the teams that support the SDK have the equivalent amount of rigor going forwards as the rest of the network teams and engineering teams.
Well, acknowledging that it's a mistake is really important. You actually clarified a lot of things for me. So it wasn't the network itself. So that's why I didn't go through the preview and then testnet and so forth. This was how people interact with the network, when they're builders. So it was changes along that front. That makes a lot more sense to me. That clears some things up. But of course, we don't want those things to happen.
It doesn't minimize the impact as well. I mean, some of our builders, would have built significant amounts of layers of value on top of the methods that were deprecated, and the breaking change would have had impact to them. As a builder myself, I kind of I fully understand that, but we learn these lessons, and the Hashgraph teams there were. I'm pretty sure it won't happen again.
Sure. Lessons learned. All right. Now we're going to have a blast from the past. I hope that this is a positive answer, but Ironsight Crypto asks, is there still a partnership with LCX? And if so, can you give any insight how the partnership is progressing?
Well, I think this means the Liechtenstein crypto exchange, right? LCX. I don't think there's any other LCX that we've had partnerships with. And as far as I know, it's, there's an HBAR euro pair on that exchange right now. So I hope that's what the questioner is referring to, and therefore it's kind of seems to be operating as expected. But if there's a different LCX that I'm not aware of, then please let me know.
All right, there we go. We'll find out and we'll go forward. Just let us know if we had the right thing there, and we'll move on. HBAR for Life wonders, when will we be able to use DREC to protect ourselves from hacks? Also, would DREC contribute to transactions on the Hedera network?
Yeah, so DREC is a protocol. Yeah, as I'm sure everyone is aware now, the Decentralized Recovery Alliance. This alliance of many of the layer ones, the design of the way to recover one's passwords or secrets in a decentralized way, the protocol for sharing these secrets across multiple helpers or trusted people or organizations is technology agnostic. So, because we've got this alliance with XRP and Cardano and the rest. So my understanding of the implementation of that means that there isn't necessarily transactions on Hedera. I suspect some implementations there will be, but it's a kind of design protocol that is being implemented in a number of different ways. So one would get access to that through the wallets or the decentralized applications that one uses. And I know Bank Social have been implementing it because they're one of the first movers. I suspect the other wallets in our ecosystem are far advanced on doing that. I don't have any other information other than that. But, at HederaCon, it was talked about a lot. It is one of the key kind of thought leadership initiatives that Hedera have led and Lehman Baird has led in the Web3 space. And it's seen as key to true retail adoption, non-degen retail adoption across Web3. I personally haven't used it yet, so presumably that means that all of the applications that I use haven't incorporated it. But I suspect fairly soon it will be something that I see and definitely have a need for. The onerousness of writing down passwords and storing them in safe deposit boxes or buried in the garden under the apple tree. We need to move on from that.
Well, here's how I look at it, Rob. It makes things more useful. It makes things more trusted, easier to use, and so forth. It's about growing the pie because more people will feel comfortable potentially using DLT, and then everybody gets more transactions because the networks are more trusted in general. So that's how I look at DREC.
For sure, and it's it's sometimes difficult to remember or to see from within our little bubble that actually the rest of the world is many magnitudes more people than those who are very focused on crypto day to day. So bridging that or expanding that bubble into people who are aren't as au fait with key management as many of us are, or not. It's very easy to get complacent as well, even if you're working with crypto on a day-to-day basis, as we see all the time. With wallet hacks and cyber attack vectors that are the Bybit hack, for example, recently would have been I think probably not DREC, but key management processes in general would have been improved if we were a little bit more familiar with the tooling and able to not be complacent about it.
Absolutely, no question. All right, so Dow1492 says, question for Rob, is there any consideration by the governing council to back HBAR with physical gold, considering the interest from the likes of Mike Maloney and the characteristics of the hashgraph technology? It seems fitting that the HBAR variant and gold bug worlds collide. Talk about Dino Alpha. So this kind of goes back to that first question we had as well, Rob. Now, I think the value for the HBAR comes from the utility of the network. I've talked about that, ad nauseum at this point. But so I don't think it makes sense to back it with gold. Essentially, what they would have to do is sell HBAR, buy gold, and then back the HBAR. I think, like I said before, it is important to have alternate forms of currency. And Hedera is going to get, and HBAR is going to get its value from one place. Gold, I think, is important. Gold and silver and all precious metals are an important part of your portfolio as well, but they can stay separate. We'll say that, there's something that goes wrong with gold. We figure out how to mine an asteroid and, gold gets a lot cheaper. Well, then cryptocurrencies might become a lot more valuable. Now, this is hypothetical, but, if crypto had an issue because of quantum computing or something like that, you'd want your other basket of crypto, or your other basket of assets in stocks and precious metals and things like that. That's where they would potentially pick up the slack. But I do think this is an interesting question. The other way that you can look at this is what we're using to peg the fees to. Right now, we use the US dollar. It's the most used fiat currency as far as business. It's the most used currency as far as business. So it makes sense for all of these companies' balance sheets, what they're denominated in, for our fees to be denominated in those as well. But in the case that there were some kind of an issue with the US dollar or fiat currency in general, we might want to peg it to something else. That might be gold. That might be Bitcoin. That might be leaving it the HBAR itself, because it becomes a big part of the economy. That's kind of how I look at the whole discussion around the usefulness around gold and HBAR.
Yeah, well, I've got very little to add to that. The question was about the governing council considering it,
sure,
and the governing council clearly has not considered this because it's not the governing council's role to do that. We provide network governance and to a lesser degree corporate governance over the LLC, and the LLC is there to serve the governing council. Investment or otherwise, or the backing or otherwise of the utility token that over which we have responsibility for only for distribution to ecosystem partners for growth of the network, and to use it in a particular way, not to shill it or invest it or use it in any other way, means that we don't touch kind of such questions. Foundation has a little bit more remit because they have now, in that sort of Hedera 2.0 construct, most of that treasury to deploy, whereas the governing council has sufficient treasury to run its operations. So the the efficient and optimized management of that HBAR treasury is Foundation's role, and the deployment of those HBAR into the ecosystem.
Yeah, makes.
It's a super interesting question, and there would be. It would be a question, I think, for an organization that acquired HBAR in order to leverage HBAR versus another asset like gold, in order to drive either investments or other for other purposes, returns presumably, and super interesting way of thinking about it.
Sure, absolutely. So this next question I got from Nauer, we've answered it a few ways. He's asking about, or he or she is asking about token burns. Now, we've talked about this a lot, changing supply. It's almost impossible to change the HBAR supply. There's 50 billion tokens out there right now. It would take a unanimous vote across the entire council, and the only permanent member, which is Swirlds, is a permanent no. And I know you've also said that as long as you're one of the representatives, you're a permanent no as well. It just shows how controversial a vote like that would be. And considering how many votes you've had with the council, how difficult it is to even get a simple majority or a super majority for some other things. To get a unanimous vote across the board to either burn tokens or add to supply would be almost impossible, right, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, specifically to add to supply, I don't think we've ever considered the token burn, but the same would apply. I think the same rules would apply for that. But from our perspective, it serves no purpose, other than to increase the token price. That's why other networks do token burns, I think, and we don't see the need for that. We have a fixed supply, which the current rate is 84% or something in circulation, or certainly allocated to ecosystem partners to release into circulation. And so for a 100-year network with utility just starting to pick up, I see no reason to apply a burn for the purposes that the governing council sees. There may be others that others might see, and other organizations, could potentially acquire to burn, but again, that serves no purpose to them either. So I'm not sure that there would ever be a world in which a token burn would be necessary for Hedera.
Now, Rob, I know that you can't comment on this, but from my perspective, if we want to attract capital in the ecosystem, native staking is the way to go. It also helps with that bottom up, providing capital to the ones that do really well in the HBAR economy. So that's the direction I would go. But next up, we have a really fun question.
You could also lock, right? I mean, you could
Sure.
create contracts that lock, large parts of the tokens in circulation. But again, other than driving price, that's probably, which isn't anything that governing council gets involved with. I'm not sure that there's any other purpose than to do that.
Sure. All right. So again, we have a fun one up here next. The Picture Man wonders, we got to know, what's Rob's favorite species of shark? Here's mine. It's a lemon shark.
Yeah, I love the lemon shark. And there is actually a lemon shark. So for people who don't know, there are, lemon shark is a species. There are 500 odd species of sharks, maybe more, because we haven't really counted them all. I'm going to put my shark geek hat on now. Some you can't differentiate between. I mean, there are 9 species of hammerhead shark, and at least 2, maybe 3 of them you can't differentiate them with the eye. It's only because of internal differences have they evolved into different species. So it's difficult to narrow down to specific species. You've got some of the largest fish in the sea, like whale sharks that can grow to 18 or 20 meters, which are quite awesome to swim with. Obviously, we've got all of our favorite ones that we've grown up knowing, like great whites and bull sharks. My favorite shark, probably because it's the most charismatic one to photograph, is a tiger shark. The tiger sharks are, they've got this incredibly feline face and broad snout, wonderful stripes. I've had some incredible encounters with tiger sharks where they've come up and bumped me, and just you have to push them away with your hand, push them down. Always have your buddy watching your back, of course, because they're they're apex predators after all. But and one of my favorite places in the world to dive is Tiger Beach, which is off the Bahamas, which I actually did a shark bites from last year when I was out there. So tiger sharks are definitely my favorite species of shark, but it's not so fun to play with the name as the Lehman shark.
And as far as the toothy ones, not including the whale shark or the basking shark, but as far as the toothy ones, it's the second biggest, right behind the great white.
Tigers can grow to 6 meters. Unfortunately, because of the massive depletion, almost to the point of extinction of sharks, you don't tend to see the big ones anymore because they've all been fished out and they take a long time to mature. But yes, certainly tigers grow to 6. Great whites grow to 6. Whale sharks actually are toothy as well. People don't realize because they're filter feeders, but they've got over 300 tiny teeth in their mouths. So they're not like whales with all the baleen. They do have teeth that have evolved to suit their way of eating. Like nurse sharks have kind of little knurled stumps because they kind of crush crustaceans. That's how they eat. But yeah, we all love the big triangular proper toothy sharks.
All right, Rob. So it's good to go a little bit off topic once in a while, but do you have anything else on the Hedera front that you'd like to discuss?
Oh, there's so much, isn't there, every week, and it's difficult to know where to like. But of course, payments being my thing, the last couple of weeks with all of the USDC on Hedera announcements. Now, you did a great job with Brady, actually, but the other way on DeFi Corner, covering why stablecoins are so important to the Hedera ecosystem and the USDC natively on Hedera, especially so. So I won't repeat all that, but of course we've got AUDD now, and I think you've interviewed Effie Dimitropoulos.
She'll be on this same show. She'll be on.
Awesome. Well, she's one of my favorite people at the moment. Launching a stablecoin studio-based Aussie dollar stablecoin on Hedera opens so many doors to so many use cases for me in particular across all of the projects that I'm involved in. So we're spending a lot of time together kind of ideating how those things can come together, because like I always say, the stablecoins aren't a use case in their own right. They're actually a primitive that enables and unlocks all sorts of really cool use cases for delivery versus payment, or supply chain, or cross-border payments, everything really. So I'm really enjoying that interaction and exploring all the different things that we might be able to do with Effie and AUDD and potentially others. So watch this space. That's great. Oh, and one last thing. So two last things. Firstly, maybe we'll get into this next week because I need to drill down a little bit more. But Wes Geisenberger and Hanya Othman are in Africa this week. There's a couple of big announcements came out a couple of days ago around the UNDP and open sourcing a full carbon registry stack, which is a pretty big deal because that technology is used by governments around the world for carbon registries. So that's now integrated with the Guardian. And there's a couple of projects that I'm also involved with that for which that's going to be super, super interesting. So that's one thing parked for next week. And finally, a big apology for my terrible math on the on last week's show. Even me, and I don't think anyone knows better than I the price of HCS transactions, but the big numbers threw me off, and doing math on the fly is obviously not ideal. So there were 2 decimal points wrong in what I was saying, but the point and the concept which I was trying to get at, which is 1,000 applications doing 1 TPS is better than 1 application doing 1,000 TPS, because it demonstrates the growth of the ecosystem and the variety of different utilities, and it's anti-fragile, doesn't have a reliance on a single use case doing high throughput. We want thousands doing just a few TPS each, and that's enough, right? I mean, because that variety is what Hedera supports. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it's it's such a broad base for a huge spectrum of use cases. So, power to all the builders working in the HBAR ecosystem, and as each of them comes to production, comes to the main net, that's ratcheting up even more TPS that we see on a daily basis. So that's it. And I'll try not to do math on the fly again.
Hey, mistakes are made. No big deal. I'm sure everybody understands. But I do have an interview this week that I think you're going to like. You were just talking about the Guardian. Check out that one I did around something Dovu is enabling. Really interesting stuff. But Rob, thank you as always for coming on here every single week and answering the community's questions.
My pleasure. See you next week.